Today, we're talking about a topic that's of great importance for those of you who are navigating the immigration system to get a green card in the United States through marriage. So the green card interview. And we're going to focus on what to expect in the relationship portion of that interview. And so this is the part where you have to show immigration or USCIS that your marriage is bona fide, or in simpler terms, that it's real. Hi, I'm SohYoon Atac. I'm an attorney and one of the founders of SimVisa. This channel is about US law, immigration, and other related topics like travel and some cultural insights. If this is of interest to you and you want to know more about how the law can serve you, please subscribe. Also, if you find this helpful, please like the video and comment down below, as we definitely check those for future videos. In the marriage green card interview, among other things, you're going to be asked questions about the authenticity of your relationship. So they're going to ask questions to determine whether your marriage is, like I mentioned before, bona fide or real. And unfortunately, you might think, why is this necessary? But it's because some people engage in what we call marriage fraud, where they're not in a real relationship, but people could even be paying each other. And there have been all sorts of things where people are actually legally married purely for the purpose of immigration benefits. So U.S. immigration has to be satisfied that this is not the case in your relationship, and instead that you really are in a marriage and intend to have a life together. So I know it can be intimidating and kind of weird to talk about your marriage, your personal relationship with an utter stranger, especially in this kind of a setting. And it is weird, but I believe that with the right preparation and an understanding of what's expected at the interview, hopefully you can approach this with confidence. So typically, the interview is held at the local, we call the district or the field office, and that's determined, according to the nearest office typically to where you live. And the interview typically takes about, I would say, anywhere between 20 minutes to about an hour. And I've been doing this a long time, so there have been interviews that have been shorter and ones that have been longer. However, I would say the average probably is about 40 minutes or so. And for the marriage portion, again, the officer will ask you a series of questions about your relationship and your life together, and so until they are satisfied that the marriage, again, is real. Now let's talk about how to best prepare for this interview and how to best prove that your marriage is real. So documentation is key. You should have presented all the proper evidence and hopefully just the right amount with the right organization with your filing, with your I-130 petition. And doing this, especially lately, has had even bigger payoffs because many of our clients are being approved without an interview. This was just, interviews were not optional before. So this is something newer, but it's really been a huge benefit. So I really hope you submitted all, the right evidence with your I-130 petition filing. If you didn't do this, all is not lost. Make sure you bring to the interview as much evidence as you can and hopefully organized that show your life together. And this could be, I would say really strong evidence would be evidence of financial commingling. So things like joint bank account statements, mortgage or lease statements, what else? Like car titles, anything that shows shared financial responsibility. And please make sure that any taxes reflect the married status. You do not want to go into USCIS and to a marriage-based green card interview with taxes where you've told the US government that you are single or not married when you are actually saying that you are married. So beyond this, I would say, if you have children, of course, bring their birth certificates. And what else? Like affidavits are very important. So you should have affidavits from people who know you guys and your relationship and that you're married and who can talk about how they know, each of you guys and, and their, belief in that, the bona fides of this married relationship. So I think also photos are a really powerful way. And this is especially the case where you may not have a long history of financial commingling, maybe because your marriage is very new or you're just starting out in kind of your financial life, then certainly it's good to have photos and other softer evidence, such as, other evidence of courtship or communications and photos like we're talking about, that kind of show your life together. And these should not just be the two of you in a room, but which would be easy to fake, but things where you're out and about in public. So you travel together or celebrating holidays with family and friends. Photos like that. And we prefer them to be annotated, which is, kind of explaining what the photos are instead of just having a stack of photos, obviously. Now, this kind of evidence, the bona fide evidence, and this goes a little beyond the point of this video, of course. Maybe I went a little too deep into it, but this is aside from the foundational documents that, of course, you'd bring to the interview, such as, birth certificates and passports and whatnot. Now, let me add here, though, that it's really important, aside from your marriage certificate, to make sure you bring evidence of the termination of any prior marriages. So that could be through, death, divorce, or annulment, but make sure you have that covered. Okay, some tips about how to conduct yourself at this interview. So, as always, honesty is the best and really only policy you should be going by. So be prepared to answer personal questions about your relationship and even maybe about your feelings. So these questions can range from, your history to what you do together, it kind of depending on the types of interview. And, there's a thing called a Stokes interview, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But again, you want to, be forthcoming and answer. It's natural to feel nervous. But remember, this is about your life and your relationship, and no one knows it better than you guys. And the officer can't tell you from anybody else. So it's incumbent upon you to really, be open and honest, and yet clearly and concisely answer the questions. So I would say definitely it's worth practicing some of the questions that, I'll get into. But you don't want to have like a memorized or rehearsed answer. That would just make you seem really like not credible and not authentic. So don't do that. At the same time, this is not a dinner party, so you don't need to be, brimming with personality or funny or entertaining. So really just give direct and concise answers and let the officer, direct the flow of the interview. The green card marriage interview is a significant step, obviously, in your immigration journey. And it's okay to not know the answer to every question. I think sometimes certain questions can be asked just to, where people really may not know the answer. And it's okay that you don't know it, but you might end up feeling like, oh no, I failed the test and I really should have known this. Don't fall into that trap. If you don't know it, speak honestly and don't try to make up or guess an answer. That would be worse for you. So let's delve into to sample questions or the types of questions that you're likely to be asked at the marriage-based green card interview. And remember, these are, examples because the actual questions can vary greatly because they may be based on your unique circumstances. These officers interview couples all day and they know what they're looking for. So it's not like they just ask the same questions every single time. Now, having said that, the one question that does seem always to be asked is this: how did you meet? So it's really important that you have an answer to tell the officer about how you met. But one thing that's a little different than the way you might tell this to another person is that in this context, the officer may ask you, when was that? Where was that? And kind of specifics like that. So it's really important to kind of together go through so you can remember all these details, especially if this was a long time ago and you might be like, I don't know if that was 2011 or 2012 or whatever it might be. And also to kind of go through, I would say, your entire relationship journey and history. And this will be fun to do, I think, so that it's fresh in your minds. Because some people are just really good, for example, with dates. But for me, for example, I would have to think really hard and remember some big event and be like, oh, that was like the summer before that. So, and you don't want to be doing that, at the immigration interview. So again, I think it's really important to kind of go through your history and try to remember those details so that's fresh in your minds for the interview. And that's a really good way to prepare. And again, with this question, even though you should be concise. You, of course, are giving a narrative response that kind of describes a circumstance surrounding, how you met and everything. Beyond this, you could, of course, be asked more questions about your relationship history, and that's pretty common. So some common ones are, when did your relationship become serious? Again, it's that time thing, so kind of go over that together. And then when did you decide to get married? Or who proposed, when, or describe the proposal. So, go over those fun details. And they can ask you questions about the wedding. So, how many people were at your wedding, or were your parents there, or who all attended, things like that. So the officer, beyond this, the officer, though, can also ask questions about your individual backgrounds. And I want to explain this a little bit because for example, if English is not a common fluent language for, both of you, for the couple, it'd be pretty common for the officer to, ascertain like what languages do you speak. And if there's a common language, then, that kind of makes sense. But, and if the couple does not have a common language, then, well, you're probably thinking that's crazy. How could that be? But actually, one thing I've learned by doing this for a long time is that love comes in all different shapes and sizes. And I've actually represented couples who, don't have a fluent common language. And the one that comes to mind is a couple, and actually there's been more than one. I've had deaf couples who actually don't speak the exact same sign language. And apparently that is very different. But there was such a connection and they made it work, and they're still married. So anyway, in a situation like that, the officer obviously could ask, well, how do you communicate and what is the method? So where you have, you don't have a common language or something like that, you definitely want to be prepared to be able to answer the officer about how you communicate in your relationship and, what impact it has and everything like that. So the goal here is for the officer to verify the authenticity of your marriage and your relationship. So they ask questions that are designed to reveal whether you really have a shared life and if that life is intertwined. And of course, whether you seem to want to have a life where you intend to have a life together. Now let's talk about what to do if difficulties arise in this interview. First of all, stay calm and composed as best you can. Even if something seems to be going awry, that doesn't mean it's all over. Just make sure you do your best to really listen to the question and to answer as best you can. So if you don't quite understand a question, don't hesitate to ask for clarification or ask the officer to repeat the question. This is especially important if English is not your first language or it's not so strong. Now, you'll know, I'm sure that, if you don't speak English or it's very weak, then you certainly need to have an interpreter with you. And that's something that you should definitely do. But again, if, you speak English, certainly, but when you're nervous and maybe if it's not so strong, then yeah, misunderstandings can occur. So make sure you slow things down and ask for clarification. Also, generally speaking, I always say, the officer will typically address the question to one of you, and only that person should answer. However, if you notice your spouse having, a brain freeze or something, and they're saying something completely, incorrect, then I think you should definitely chime in. So, because it could just be nerves and or maybe they misunderstood the question. So typically, stay quiet. Only the person who's asked should answer. But if you're hearing something that's utterly wrong, then obviously step in. Now let's talk about what types of things can potentially trigger an officer's suspicion that the marriage may not be genuine. So, of course, lack of, documentary evidence. So make sure you've already submitted it. And if not, take a lot with you. But specifically, if there's no evidence of any financial commingling, so sharing of financial responsibilities, I think that certainly can raise some doubts. So in the least, you should have a joint bank account. And if not, then there should be a really good explanation as to, why that's the case. Because otherwise, if they don't see any bills or, or things that tend to show utilities addressed to each of you, at least at the same address or to both of you, if there's, again, financial responsibilities like shared credit cards or things like that, that can, raise some doubts as to whether you're truly, sharing your life together. Another factor that may bring on extra scrutiny is if you have very different backgrounds. So an example is, what I've already mentioned. Let's say you don't share a common language, but it can be other factors such as maybe, you have a very huge gap between your ages. You're very different in age, or you have very different educational backgrounds. So as you can see, because, in the world, oftentimes couples might have some similar, external factors. So if you're a couple that, and this is aside from how much you actually love each other, and all that, but just if you don't share much external factors, then you really need to be prepared. So also a lack of, as I mentioned, documentary evidence, and this would include photos, I think is also something that could cause further scrutiny. So, you want to have documents showing your photographs, showing kind of your life through, hopefully a longer time period. Now, I've also represented couples who had a very quick from meeting to courtship to marriage, and it was like a whirlwind, romance, and it was very fast. But yeah, things like that can also cause further scrutiny. So again, do your best with photos and whatever other evidence you have to really demonstrate your life together. If the officer doesn't believe there's enough evidence to convince them of the bona fides of your marriage, or worse yet, if the officer becomes suspicious that your marriage may not be genuine, a few different things can happen. So they may request more evidence to prove that your marriage is bona fide. So this could include additional photos or financial documents or affidavits from family and friends. So this is typically called an RFE, which is short for, we call it that, for request for evidence. And if you are issued a request for evidence, don't panic. It's actually not that uncommon. Then make sure you cooperate and you submit, a really well documented, evidence, case for the bona fides of your marriage, and you submit that, as good as you can, as soon as possible. But if you don't have enough documents, I wouldn't just rush to file. You should actually take your time to make a really thorough response to the RFE. So, and remember, it's okay to seek legal counsel if you're unsure about anything. And an experienced attorney, immigration attorney, can certainly provide you guidance and help you navigate through the process. Another thing that can happen is that, you just may end up having a more thorough interview. So typically it'll be more detailed and potentially, maybe more uncomfortable questions and probably longer. But again, even though this might be a more intense experience, you need to, provide your best responses. And then lastly, in some cases, the officer may decide to conduct what is called a Stokes interview. And that's a kind of an interview where you and your spouse are separated, and you are interviewed separately, and they tend to ask similar questions and to compare your responses to see if they're consistent. This is definitely more intense scrutiny, and it's not very common. It's only used when the officer has significant doubts, typically, about the bona fides of the marriage. So they want to see if if your stories align, if you have, kind of personal knowledge of each other and your habits and life and history, as a married couple, they believe, would. So typical questions that they would ask, that have been asked at a Stokes interview, are questions like, a popular topic are holidays. So, what did you do last Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, or whatever? So again, I would say to prepare, hopefully you will not have a Stokes interview, but certainly, as I mentioned before, go through your history and definitely hit kind of the holidays and see, what were we doing? Like, were we with, parents, or, my aunt's house, or, whatever, or at home because we're tired, or, wanted to have a night in, whatever it is, kind of go through so that, it's fresh in your minds. And then, they can ask questions about like the arrangement of your home. So, when you enter, where's the living room, or, some questions of that nature. There can also be questions about, daily kind of routines or habits, such as who does the cooking, or what cuisine do you guys, cook a lot or something, or what's your spouse's favorite TV show, things of that nature. So these are, again, questions that tend to do with your life together. And in a Stokes interview, any inconsistencies or answers that don't match, that is a serious concern. So, I think it's important to be honest and also be super clear. So if you don't know the answer to a question, again, as I said before, it's better to, state that you don't know instead of making up an answer that actually contradicts what your spouse said, and then that's, incorrect. If you find yourself in a Stokes interview, then again, it's especially important to stay calm and to really pay attention and to listen to the question and to answer honestly and as concisely and as best as you can. I shot another video, a tutorial that was, I think, a couple hours long about preparing for the interview, which I don't think is up anywhere any longer. But so I could go on and on about this. But I think what's really important is that you get an understanding of what the officers are looking for and what to expect in this kind of an interview, which you are getting by watching this video, because preparation is key. And so hopefully this can help you prepare for your interview by, making sure that you have either updates to the documents or documents demonstrating the bona fides, the reality, the genuineness of your good faith relationship, and also what types of questions can be asked and what to expect. And I think kind of just having an understanding of this can hopefully help boost your confidence and help you, stay focused and answer the questions. If you're approved, you will receive the approval notices and hopefully your green card in the mail. Assuming you didn't have other issues. So, this video didn't cover issues of inadmissibility, which will be probably for, a future video. But and hopefully you'll receive your green card, which will be amazing. And if further evidence is needed, then you'll receive an RFE, the request for evidence that we discussed before. And you want to make sure that you answer that in a timely and thorough, manner. And then if the officer has doubts about the bona fides of your marriage and believes that, you've not met the burden of showing that your marriage is real, then you could receive a notice of intent to deny. So NOID for short. And that would lay out the specific reasons of why the officer intends to deny your case. And you, just like the RFE, would have time to make a response. So I think here, if you have been doing this yourself without counsel, I would highly encourage you to seek the advice of an immigration attorney if you receive a notice of intent to deny. Now, in fact, even if not, I would definitely encourage all of you to consider working with or consulting an immigration attorney for your process, because every situation is unique. And I think having professional guidance can be really helpful. I hope this video has helped you get a better understanding of what to expect at the marriage-based green card interview, especially about the part that's all about showing that your marriage is real. If you found this helpful, please like the video and share it with someone who you think might benefit from this information. And for more like it, please subscribe. Also, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, as we're definitely checking those for future videos. Thank you for watching, and I wish you the best in your immigration journey and also in your life together as a couple. So have a great rest of your day.